Welcome everyone to the series I Can Relate. I Can Relate is a series di mana we can learn from people about their investment journey, about their career journey. And we think that we are differentiated because these people lagi mengalami pengalaman-pengalaman yang amat sangat bagus dan bisa di-share supaya mereka bisa menumbuhkan their career, and then their personality, and then their investment journey as well. Hari ini kita kedatangan tamu yang amat sangat spesial. He's actually my high school friend. Waktu itu kita sekolah di Singapura bareng. And then he was super smart, so he went on to study in Oxford University at the time. He also went on to work in digital banks as a software engineer in London. And then now he's, starting his own venture as a co-founder, startup co-founder. And his name is obviously none other than Owen, gitu kan. So I guess the question that I want to ask you is that when people introduce you today, do you see yourself as an engineer, founder, or something else entirely?
That's a good question. I mean, it depends on who's introducing me. If in a normal situation, I would always say, I'm Owen, right? My name. But if it's like a stranger in a business situation, I will always say I'm a founder, right? So a founder, just so that that is the work that I'm doing. That's the primary work that I'm doing. But I mean, if it's a non professional situation, I would just not actually reveal anything and let the conversation, meander to whichever topic is relevant, and then bring up work. Bring up my experience at banks. Like brief example, I had a run with a group of people, and like a lady came up to me, and I actually came up to her to ask about running because we just had a run, and we just kept talking about running, and then I just started to introduce myself, but I didn't just say like I'm a founder. I just say my name and continue on with the conversation. But then it revealed itself, like, oh, we have similar interests. Turns out she's also a founder, and we just talked about being a founder, right? And it became very interesting when we revealed more about the fact that, oh, she is co-founding her husband, right? Which is very interesting in itself. I co-founded with my girlfriend. So I think for me, I'd rather in social situations, let the conversation just go. But in professional, I just want to be straightforward.
For sure. Jadi kayak lebih contextual. And then for professional, you want to be straightforward. And then if it's like a friends basis, then you want to be conversational gitu. And then let it go aja gitu kan. Then I'm quite curious, when you introduce yourself as a founder, for example, people have certain stereotypes about what is becoming a founder like, and then people have stereotypes about being a professional, and you are basically have done both kayak gitu kan, both as a professional, as a founder, and then it seems like at least what you look to me is like it feels like everything is sorted on your end gitu kan, you're like on top of things, tapi does it feel like it's sorted, everything rapi kayak gitu internally?
No.
Okay.
It never is, and unfortunately, I think from people that I hear, it will never be rapi. Rapi itu not a vocabulary that then an entrepreneur would generally understand. But
okay.
I like just to compare, like for example, if I were to not be a founder and just be a software engineer at a company, there is always that little level of insecurity, of course, and I there is stability in career, but when you think about it, people would always think of, oh, what is there a better career out there? And of course, when I was at Starling Bank, that's how I felt. If there is something else that I can do, and when I say that I am a software engineer at Starling Bank, I felt okay, but it didn't feel that this is this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life, right? It's not, it doesn't feel that way.
How did you deal with that situation when, is there anything else better outside of this for me? Kayak gitu.
I think it really helped at that point that I was doing a lot of things on the side. That's kind of my way of scratching my itch. So even way back before that moment of questioning myself, I've always wanted to try something for myself. So that has been the experience. So waking up 9 and then getting off work at 5, having dinner, and then at night I was just gonna code something, read something that's interesting and try to build something. So a lot of projects, right? But I think part of that journey is, okay, is this the right thing that I'm working on to say that, okay, this is it, this is the time that I'm going to quit, right? So it took me a while, right? And I don't think there's a kind of recipe to say, if I were to introduce myself and say I'm X or I'm Y, and then I'll be like, yes, this is like, I'm super confident that I'm this. There isn't, I wouldn't say that there was like a plan that I took on to kind of reach that point. I think what is happening is, right, I learned something more about myself, about what do I actually, what's my relationship with that label? Like, if I am a founder, how does that make me feel? If I am not a founder, how does that make me feel? And by doing this like exploratory work, by taking action, I actually reveal something about myself that I didn't know before. And when I say the next day, even if I was using the same label, I would feel different because I learned something about myself.
So you ask these questions about yourself on a day-to-day basis, and what does it mean to be a founder to you, and how do you feel becoming a founder versus not becoming a founder? But at some point, there's also like this tension of comfort versus calling kayak gitu kan. Jadi, for example, if you are a founder gitu kan, you might have a certain kind of calling, right? But then when you start your own business, that calling might, okay, I might want more comfort gitu. I might want to actually return back to my day-to-day job, for example. Or as a day-to-day job, I feel that I'm too comfortable. I have a calling to become a founder. So this is something that definitely would require some more self-reflection kayak gitu kan. So how do you deal with that constant tension? Difficult questions, yeah.
When I mean, as a founder, like, I always seek comfort. Let's be real. Like, it's when there's a lot of things in my mind. And there's many days in the week that there's so many things that I was like, okay, I need to do so many things, but there's also so many discussions I need to have with this person and that person. It really wanted me, like, my mind would always veer towards, okay, let's take a break. Let's move to that comfort zone, right? And that's like at the micro level. But it's also hard to realize at that point when to kind of give into that comfort and actually take a break because it is actually helpful. And when that comfort becomes too costly, I would say, from moving towards your calling, right? Now, I have to caveat this that, like, calling is something I have not figured out fully. And I know that a lot of founders would say, oh, this is my calling. But the for me right now, it's kind of a curiosity, and more of an exploration, right? Right now, I'm currently building software for physicians, and my girlfriend is very in this very world. She is a physician, and she suffers from a lot of the problems in healthcare. And I really want to help her, and I really want to help people like her. And I feel that that's a very useful thing that I can do. But I mean, it's something that if, let's say, in the next 2 to 3 years, and things don't go as well, and I would say, okay, this doesn't go well. Why does it not go well? And is that going to change my calling in the future? I would be open to it. I'll be open to it. Yeah.
Tapi mungkin you can also explain a little bit more so you can talk definitely more about the things that you're working on. What kind of software that you're building for physicians, and then what problem are you trying to solve, and then why in particular is it a calling for you, and when does it feel like an aha moment for you to, okay, this is something that is worth for me to like quit my 9 to 5 job, well-paying job di Starling Bank waktu itu di London gitu kan, and then let's like try to quote unquote gamble and like live in SF for like a couple of months and try to work this gitu. But yeah, feel free to for the sake of the audience, feel free to make it concrete juga in your particular journey about like what you are building, why this particular problem is very, very meaningful for you. And in a sense that this might be the calling, even though you haven't really fully figured it out yet.
Well, at that point, it was actually quite, it's a sequence of events. So I was building a product with another person that was like a potential business partner. And my girlfriend was also kind of in this career change. She was considering moving away from her physician work, but still within the kind of medicine field. And she started trying to do sort of like a business on the side, right? So eventually she quit her job as a doctor, and she started doing projects, from trying to build a tote bag business. And I started observing from afar, okay, she's starting to do these kind of entrepreneurial things. And at that point, she started to kind of, she started to raise this question of, okay, Owen can be a good co-founder. And we had this conversation, and I was like, okay, maybe not now, because I'm currently working on this project. I want to see this through. And eventually, I started to realize, a lot of the considerations for building a business is finding the right business partner. And Liz at that point was, on paper, pretty amazing. Not because of the skills, but because of the determination and the focus.
Skillsnya juga.
So, I mean, the skills in, yes, well, depends on, well, I mean, she can't code, right? But she does do many other things that are very important, right? Like talking to people, like moving things along and executing on the plan is also very crucial, and she does that very well. But then I realized in my own project that it actually wasn't moving at all. And there was not a lot of progress and momentum coming from me and my potential business partner. So to long story short, I kind of moved on from that project and that business partner, and decided to give it a try with Liz. And because Liz is in the medicine field, I told myself, let's do this. Let's just focus on something that we both agree we should work on. And that's medicine, right? So that's how we got started. That's how we finished, or not finished, but completed that kind of, I would say, exploratory phase of like which industry we should go to, and just stick to medicine. We can talk a bit more about like the different projects we've done across the different months, but the kind of calling, I guess, is and it sounds a bit weird, but it comes through Liz, right? And it also it comes from wanting to help Liz achieve her own calling, and that is actually for me a good place to start to build something meaningful for myself and to keep motivating myself to do good work.
And what I find interesting from your comments and your remarks is that it's not something that is super flashy or like, oh yeah, I grew up with my parents who's like a physician, and then they experience these problems, blah, blah. It's not something that is like really, I would say, extravagant, or it doesn't have to sound very, very flashy, but it sounds very, very real in the sense that, okay, your, see, Liz is in the medicine, in the healthcare sector, and then she's very knowledgeable in it, and she's very determined as a person. And then you feel that there's a lot of problems that you can basically figure out in the healthcare industry, especially in the United States. And I can code, and I think that I'm willing to take this risk to be a co-founder with her. And yeah, let's just start. And she also has her ideals, her idealism, as a physician as well, I suppose, yeah, in the medical industry. So you guys would want to work on something together to solve that problem. So I feel that it's as real as it gets. It doesn't have to be something that is brushed with like, bright colors and fancy stories, right?
I think it's a founding story is a very personal story, and like I mean, I can give you like a bit of a like sense of how that manifests. You would hear a lot of the media stories about how companies get started, and then you get to meet that person in real life, have dinner with them, and realize that actually the founding story goes way back, and so early that it would be embarrassing to be told in media. So I think that is kind of freeing to know that, well, you can make your own story. Like your story is yours to make, and you can just do it. So I learned to kind of demystify that. A lot of the tropes of a founder that the media likes to paint because of certain, I would say, incentives, right? But that founder tropes, soon when you're actually in it, it doesn't really help, number one, but number two, it's not true most of the time. Right.
Makes sense.
And at the end of the day, when you're a founder, you just, I met another fellow founder and he was talking to another person, and that person is no different than me and no different than a lot of other people that I've known.
Yeah. Makes sense.
And also just now you've mentioned that you had like side projects before going on with this project with Liz, with your girlfriend. And then you were also like having a stable job before in London. And I'm pretty sure in between you moving and like deciding on like what to do with your working time, there's definitely going to be risks associated with, jumping ship, quitting your job, or like, having side projects, or like, for example, pursuing this. I mean, I was like you, I have to be honest with you. I think I was the one who told you last time that, are you really, really sure that you want to do business with your girlfriend? That was like me at the time. So I'm just curious to learn more about how do you view risk, like previously and then today, and how has that changed, or like how has that not changed, and because different people maybe view risk differently, and you might have your own version.
Actually, I want to ask you a question, because when I called you, well, what's in your mind the risk?
Okay.
Because I did call, so for context, I did call Toby, and I told him like, hey, I'm gonna co-found with my girlfriend. Do you have any opinions? Do you have any opinions? And okay, just in a nutshell, he is like cautioning me. Toby's cautioning me, okay, you should be careful. But in your mind, like what's going on, what's going through that?
Yeah, what's my definition of risk is very, very simple. It's how much you would lose if your assumption turns out to be wrong. So for example, like if you can, so I was very, very intentional in saying that when you start a company with your girlfriend, like you need to be able to make sure that the professional and the personal is like absolutely separate, so that if the professional doesn't really work out, you can still have like a good personal relationship. All right, because like for me, when you do business, there's definitely a chance that the business will not work out, right? And what do you have to lose if the things actually does not work out? So that's my version of risk. And actually, I apply this to investing as well. So when you buy a company, for example, let's say 10% of your company A in your portfolio, what do you have to lose if your assumption turns out to be wrong? Which is why we buy with a lot of margin of safety, and then we buy companies with good quality management, good quality prospects and products, and so on and so forth, so that that downside is kind of minimized, even if we turn out to be wrong, because we can't see what's the future going to be like. But that's my version. So, yeah.
I mean, to kind of directly address that, because that's very important, I feel. What if the assumption is wrong, right? What if you're not successful? I always think of think of the worst case scenario, what's going to happen. It's of course, like there's the money question, right? Like how much are we willing to lose in terms of money, and if this thing fails, how are we going to recover from that? But more big, I think what you're alluding to is the relationship. Will the relationship kind of survive through that? And it's scary to think now, but it is true. We did agree as co-founders and as partners that the relationship comes first. So that's kind of an assurance. And it's quite a powerful one because it shapes decisions and shapes, I would say, the interactions we have. So that is one. The second thing is what is happening now, because we have actually gone through that. We've passed that kind of stage. We've taken the leap of faith. We've actually gone through it full time. And it's still very risky. Like every day, there's always discussions to be had around the business and discussions to be had around the relationship. So balancing that is always and has been a challenge. I'm not gonna say that I have the solution for that like fully, although like there's a lot of like okay, I could have done this better, I could have done that better.
For sure.
And there's always new challenges ahead, but I think how I manage them is to understand the way we make decisions are very are grounded, right? We're not making speculative decisions as a business because we feel like it, although we want to intuit that decision very well. And I think intuition is very important in making like very, I would say, quick decisions when it's needed. But when it comes to making big decisions, our business has to be grounded with numbers, evidence, and if there isn't any at that point, because we're pretty early stage, of course, then we make the best educated guess based on experience, right? Like past life experience or what people say around us. And it's weird to say, but that makes things much easier to reason both in work and in life, because you've made the best decision at work. So whatever happens afterwards, it comes from a point of earnestness. And when that happens, you still have that trust between you and your business partner.
Mhm.
And if your
Mhm.
business partner happens to be a partner, you might want to think that work and life you can make it compartmentalized. But unfortunately, I mean, not unfortunately, I guess, the reality is, in my case, Liz is one person. So
Mhm. Mhm.
you will inadvertently kind of have to understand that things that happen at work will affect the same person outside of work, right? So
Mhm.
knowing that the work decisions are made in earnest is quite crucial.
Yep. Yeah. So when you have the very best of intention and then you make earnest decisions based on what you knew at that time, right? With the data and the evidence that is available, then you can, so to speak, minimize the regrets, or you, at the very least, you make grounded decisions that would move your business forward.
Yeah, because there is, people that tell us to do things that sound very cool, sound very
Mhm.
founder-like, but we realize that, maybe not, because um, though there's layers that we kind of soon hit to say, right, does this even make sense in the business, right? And they might be building something very different. They might be in a totally different industry, but it happens that a lot of founders do the same things, and it became like this groupthink of, oh, this is the way to do things. But
Yeah.
it turns out that
Yep.
actually we have to start from ourselves and
Yep.
take those ideas from people as like, okay, those are data points. Let's kind of go back to where we are now and see why we should or shouldn't go to in that direction, and what direction should we take.
Yeah. Give me example of that, like a concrete example where, for example, an advice that you receive from a co-founder might run contrary to what you should be doing as a business based on your personal experience running your own startup, or because like what you mentioned, sometimes when you talk to co-founders in Jakarta, for example, they might have the tendency to, I'm not saying this is bad or something, but then they might have the tendency to be overly focused on like what's going to be like the milestone that you want to achieve for the next fundraising game. But for us, we don't really look at fundraising as like a milestone. We look at it as like something that, oh yeah, if we need to fundraise, then we'll fundraise. But then if we don't need to, then there's no need to fundraise, right? We just want to grow the business as much as we can, and then see if there's a requirement that requires us to fundraise, and we fundraise. That's my mentality regarding fundraising. And then you might have different take, or like you might have received different advice or like ideas from different co-founders that you might not entirely be in the same page with, right?
Oh yeah, I'm going to say something about fundraising because that is the example I was going to give you.
Okay. You can let me know what example of fundraising.
And one thing about it is that we have conflicting accounts about whether we should fundraise, right? That's number
Uh-huh.
one. And just to give you the highlights, right? Number one, whether we should fundraise or not. Number two, when we should fundraise, which gives also another layer of flavor. And number three, how much? There's multiple different accounts for each of these three questions, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just start with the first, and then maybe we have time, second, third, we can talk about it. The first is whether we should fundraise or not. And a lot of people say we shouldn't fundraise, actually. The
Bootstrap,
reason,
man.
yeah, and the main reason a lot of people give is you would soon realize a lot of the demand from the investors about growth for the startup becomes counterproductive to how your company should grow,
Mm-hmm.
because of maybe I've just an example, the founder that told me that has had an amazing year in the business. They grew a lot, right? And the founders were actually very happy about the outcome. But I mean, the investors weren't happy, right? And gave quite unrealistic expectations for the business.
Yeah.
So, like, okay, so then expectations are not matched, and the founders are very pressured to kind of do something to kind of make it grow. And that became such a, what do you call it? Like a handcuff, right? You're
Yeah.
being handcuffed into going somewhere that you might not be happy going to, but you have to go because you're in handcuffs.
Yep.
And then there's another one that says we should fundraise because bootstrapping is hella painful.
Yes.
So kind of prolonging the pain, right? And you can actually shorten the pain just by fundraising. And fundraising is no joke. It's very painful. But at least it's kind of, there's an end to it. I mean, there's a lot of variable there, like whether you're gonna take longer or shorter, but eventually you will be done with fundraising, and then if you're happy with the outcome, then that's another question. But at least that's done, and you got some money to kind of operate the business on, and you have a bit of a breathing room, right? A relief. So just in that kind of first example, how we approach it is, okay, what's the fundamentals of the business? Whether we actually need to fundraise, right? And that starts with, okay, if we don't fundraise at all, what's going to happen with the business? And this answer changes all the time, by the way, according to like the realities of the business. But number two, if we fundraise, what should we do with the money? What should we do with the investors? And then it becomes a conversation of how do we want to carry this business in the long term when we actually have investors around? Because we want to bring these investors on a journey together, and we want to make sure that we don't shortchange ourselves in the middle. And I would say break the trust of the investor, because the investors want certain outcome, but we suddenly don't want that, right? So that part, like, I mean, it's still a work in progress, by the way. Like, we haven't like actually like derive a very clear conclusion for that. But we always start from the back of the envelope calculation, right? And based on the accounts of people, synthesize that. How does that founder's experience that told us not to fundraise relate to our experience? Maybe that founder just unfortunately onboarded the wrong the wrong investor, right? If he onboarded the right investor, he might not be in this position, right? Who knows? Maybe it's an education on choosing the right investor. And if we do want to choose the right investor, that's on the side of the founders. How do we approach that? How do we plan the fundraise in a way that maximizes the chances of meeting these kind of investors? Then it becomes a question of, okay, if let's say we decide to fundraise and we know that fundraising is painful, and we know that there's a potential for investors to be in bad behavior, how do we minimize that, right? And all of these kind of questions and answering really help us like make the like fundraising question more concrete, and actually makes us less afraid at this point, because we know more and we know what the business needs. That's it. I mean, we can go on to the second and third question of the fundraise, but I think that gives a perspective on like the two opposing viewpoints and how do we like synthesize it. We're always starting from the business. Yeah.
You mentioning that you want to be onboarding the right investor. From my experience, for what I know, what you want to do in order to be able to onboard like the right investors is just to be yourself when you are like pitching, because especially at the early stage, maybe in the later stage, I don't know, like Series C, Series D, whatever, or like IPO, I don't know. But then at the early stage, like so many things is just unknown, gitu kan. So you just want to make sure that you find people who have the same beliefs as you, who sees the future the same way as you do. And if you communicate that like transparently and honestly and earnestly, then by law of attraction, hopefully you would, attract like the right people that would be a good long-term partner, not just like a person who's just willing to look for quick returns from your venture. Yeah.
And it's a people business, right?
Yeah.
I think with people business, a lot of people think that in business, a bit of distastefulness is allowed because it's business.
Yeah.
But in my experience, trusting your own intuition about a person it pays dividends, because you would want to work with someone that you like, even if they're investors,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And like the first 5 minutes of that conversation, whether you like that person or not, it's quite informative. Whether the next 20 minutes of that conversation would be a good conversation or not, I was gonna say it's like a people business.
Yeah.
Investing. So you want to know the person, and I think people, I think at least me in the past, think that if you want to do business, a bit of distastefulness is okay, because it's business and business is meant to be distasteful. But soon I realized that it's like trusting one's intuition about a person, and if you don't like that person, then you're not good to do business with that person, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that, just trusting your own intuition, pays dividends, because it filters out so many people and attracts the people that you really want to work with. And actually, at the end of the day, you want to spend time with people that you like. So, including investors, right? Intuition is quite a underrated thing.
Underrated thing. And that's a very, very powerful statement, right? Because you want to work with people that you like, including your investors. And, the tricky thing about people is that, people have the tendency, for example, to, hype things up, like, in startups or like in the markets. Like you see like a lot of people, especially in the public markets, they can talk about stocks that is, I would say, unhealthy for like the market ecosystem at the very least, because it creates this, like unwanted emotions amongst market participants, right? So how do you usually, and when you mention about like having a good intuition about whether you look at this person based on your personal experience, is this a person that I want to work with or not, is something that is really, really important. It's a very, very clear answer. I use my intuition. So then the question becomes like, how do you develop that intuition? When you sense that, okay, I think this is like a little bit overhyped by people, or like I think this is like something that is, I think this is a person that I can trust, because there always going to be some element of trust when it comes to working with people, right? Not everything is 100% transparent, even if you want to. Even if you use like a blockchain, there's some way that you can basically scam the hell out of another person, right? So how do you deal with it?
That's a good question. I think it comes with interacting with people
More.
I don't know. I can't give you a better answer than that, because I think the intuition you have is like an aggregate of your entire life experience. Like the people that you meet along the way informs your understanding about people, right? And the people that you meet, for you, Toby, is going to be the different people that I meet from me, because we just live different lives, right? So our intuitions will be different, and what we like and don't like about people will be different too. But just how do we get there? It's like, how do we even like start, right? Because if I don't trust this person, how do I even like, do business or like interact with this person? So I think it really helps to have this default trust attitude to kind of say, I'm going to trust this person. And if you don't, okay, if they break the trust, then okay, no good, right? But that risk on the person, on yourself to say, I default will trust this person first. Okay. Would actually help you, or at least it did help me build that connection and know to kind of, I would say, trust parts of my intuition and not trust parts of my intuition, right? Like, what are the blind spots that I need to be aware of while interacting with people? And I say this because the people that you interact with when you were younger are not the same kind of people that you interact with when you're older. And you would not be able to be exposed to the people that you're interacting with now when you're older, because just the environment you were in school, in university is very different, right?
Yeah, very controlled.
So, very controlled. So that kind of correction you need whilst interacting with people and reflecting on that, plus default trusting is like a good framework, I guess. But I would like to caveat it because it's hard, I think the difference, this is what I realized, between US and actually not only US, like, but Western countries versus Indonesia and like other Southeast Asian country, is that like in society in Southeast Asia don't tend to just trust people, right?
Yeah.
You need to earn it, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And I don't think, I mean, that's just the way it is. I think doing that default trust framework in Indonesia is gonna be much harder than if you would do it in like the UK or the US, when there's just a very high trust society. Default trust is much easier to do, right? Like, you don't get burned too often. So yeah, I mean, I think I would say it works for me, but if you're like, let's say, in a low trust society, maybe you can adopt your own approach. Maybe default trust might not be for you, right? I think it's still a good framework, and it's just going to be harder. But if there is a better way of doing it for yourself, maybe you should do that.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, I guess for me, I will always refer to the data and the track record, because like you can, build like a track record that is good for a short-term period, and then, but it is very, very difficult for you to build a good track record for a long-term period. So that's just like what you want to aim, especially in a low-trust society, like that good track record, which requires a lot of, I would say, patience, which brings me back to like this, which brings me to like the next question for you as well, which is about when you are investing or when you are doing entrepreneurship, which is also a form of investment in your own business. How do you remain patient? And how do you, because there's also like, there's this certain sense that you need to be hyper urgent, that you need to get things done quickly, but you also know that the problem that you're trying to solve is something that is difficult to solve, that requires a lot of patience. So how does that, how do you deal with that, and how has that changed over time, and how does that affect the way you approach your investments as well?
I think for patience, I kind of reinforced today. I actually attended a talk by a monk, which is a bit bizarre, but he told me something that kind of reinforced my belief, is that the fear is caused by another person, right?
Okay.
And I think that sums it up, because I think patience, or rather impatient, is you want to kind of the urge to do something because you can't wait any longer. But you can't wait any longer because there's some external factors that pushes you towards that direction, right? And I think the first kind of high level step is to just be aware of things. And that kind of applies to both the business and investing, right? When I hear about people invest in certain things here and there, I will always look at the person to see, who is this person? Why is this person even talking about this? And like, what has he or she done before that led this person to kind of come to this point, kind of tell people to buy, right, or sell or whatever. That goes with the business as well, right? When people give us very different advice, or even just pure mechanics of the business. If there's no customers, if we did a mistake in the business, that's like, oh damn, we could have done this better, or like, it's, or even something around like, oh, we should have fundraised earlier, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think what helps is knowing the fundamental truths about why the business should exist. Number one,
Mm-hmm.
when you think that the business should exist because it's has a net good value for the people that you want to serve,
Mm-hmm.
and then you start with that, right? You start with, okay, what would it take for the business to achieve its purpose, and work backwards to where you are, and then that would kind of eliminate a lot of the noise that causes you to be impatient. Maybe there's certain perspectives that you thought is real, I guess, to kind of threaten your business, and turns out that actually no, it doesn't really, right? And it can be cleared up by just starting with that basics, and that requires a lot of honesty, because you gotta have to peel off a lot of these, in business there's like a lot of fake metrics, right?
Yeah.
And you gotta peel that off and just see, okay, how much cash do you actually have in your business, right? And just literally like build a timeline. And okay, if you earn revenue for this month and the next month and the next month, with the burn rate that we have in a business, how much, like, how many months do we have left, right? And kind of that itself, this exercise, like, simplifies everything to make, and then you can actually start building good decisions from that very simple framework of like, okay, how much cash do we have? Of course, there's many other metrics in business, right? Like, even something as personal as you, like the state of the founder, because the founder is the teacher of the business, right? Whether you actually want to still do this, and it's it's quite scary to ask that question all the time, but sometimes I do ask that question, and I would actually kind of very carefully listen to that answer and say, okay, maybe today's answer might be different, but what is actually the reason why you were here in the first place? And what causes you to change your mind, let's say? And is that external factor something that you should worry about, or is it even real? And then kind of work backwards from there. So just grounding yourself to reality and being aware of who is saying what and why they do it.
I think it hits hard when you say that a lot of the fear that we've experienced as a person is caused by other people. And I think that's entirely correct. And the fear that gets, real inside you causes you to be a little bit more impatient into the things that you're doing. And then I'm afraid that things will not go that way, or I'm afraid that things will not go this way. And then you end up maybe doing X is better than doing Y. And then you just end up not continuing your pursuit as a person.
Yeah, and the fears that you hear about, many common things around, I fear, like I fear I wouldn't get the promotion that I was promised. Like, it's a very common fear. And it's caused by a certain story that some people tell you about them not getting a promotion, right? which I mean, true, their story is true, but you are living your own story, and your story can be very different from their story, right? And that's also caused by your boss that reacts in a different way when they talk to you, that might give you a wrong signal about your ability to be promoted, for example, right? So yeah, that's I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I think I'm pretty sure like the insights that you get from the feeling of impatience and patience is not something that you learn overnight. And I'm pretty sure that you have like all other insights that you can think of as you are going through life at this juncture. I'm wondering like what kind of advice that you would actually give to a younger self, a younger Owen.
Be curious. That's the one thing. It drives everything. It drives everything. It drives all the hard work. It drives all the patience, actually. When you think of all the sets of actions you take as experiments, it demystifies a lot of things, and it makes you fear less. You still fear, but at least it's under control, and you're aware of the failure, and still be able to move forward because you're curious about the outcomes, about the effects of things, about your actions. And you learn a lot more. And just pure knowledge wise, you will be curious about certain things that resonate with you, and you double down on it, and you'll be very good at it, right? And you'll be more skillful in the future, and it just compounds.
Yeah. And especially like curiosity is very, very applicable to so many things as well, including your own emotions. When you feel a certain way, rather than like trying to judge the emotions that you have. For example, if you're afraid, like, oh, like I'm such a loser, or I'm such a weak person, instead of judging yourself, like you can be curious, oh, why do I feel this way? Like what triggered me to feel this way? And when you start questioning, and when you start being curious about your own self and emotions and your own work, then it makes it so much easier for you to regulate your emotions, and you feel a lot less fear as well, and you would be a lot more patient when it comes to dealing with yourself and dealing with your day-to-day life. Mantap, nice. Yeah, I agree. I do agree. No. That's like something that I would advise to my younger Toby as well. I think younger Toby is just a happy-go-lucky person. Okay. Yeah, and I don't know, like, what made so when you say that, okay, be curious to your younger self, and I'm also curious, how has your belief changed over time that made you want to give that kind of advice to that younger Owen?
I think it's like the things that drive me in the past. A lot of the explorations I've done in the past, the projects I've done, the people that I talk to. I mean, very random people that I talk to. It kind of shaped my worldview, and it also drives a lot of the, I would say, the work that I do too, because of the compounding effects of the different projects I've done, it becoming a bigger thing, me getting better skills, and combined with this relentless need to kind of know things, it just doesn't stop, right? And you don't feel that like it takes X number of years to do this. Like I'm already like suffering the first 6 months. Like how am I gonna sustain this? I never thought of it that way. Like it's always about, right, did I learn something today? If I don't learn anything, I'll just feel so bad. And I think that's kind of I mean, on hindsight, that's quite an interesting state to be in, I feel. But also, I think part of I wouldn't say curiosity will guarantee success, that's for sure. because I think if you look for like I want to be very rich, how would I achieve that? I think there's a lot of luck in there, but I think for the life, a fulfilling life, I feel for me, it's definitely has to have some level of curiosity in there.
I mean, you also talked about like becoming rich, and let's not pretend that when you want to become an entrepreneur, like you also have you want to be wealthy, right? So, but what do you think about wealth, and what did you? A lot of people being rich equals having a lot of money in the bank, right? But I don't know if you have a different definition to that, and how does that change over time as well as you go through life?
Quite interesting. So I think when I was a kid, I never like had the want to be rich.
Okay.
A big part of that maybe because I was being naive, right? But I think, and then afterwards, I started to start talking to people, building stuff, like doing the work in a job, and then being a founder. And I realized, okay, so actually, being rich is, it can equate to power, right? And I'm not. It's a very kind of a neutral statement because power can be good or bad depending on who sees that power, right? But at the same time, I also see people who see rich as just kind of a hedonistic, in a hedonistic lens. You become rich so that you can spend the money, spend the money on yourself, essentially. And I never believe that I want to be that person. I actually don't want to be that person, right? Like just spending money on like very expensive stuff and just and that's it. That's the existence. I actually be for me, if let's say I am rich, is going to be the having the intelligence to know how to spend that money in a useful way for you to achieve, I would say, your calling, right? And that calling can be anything. But if there is, if you have kind of figured that out, like what the how to allocate that wealth into the things that you care about, and not only about yourself but other people and the values you want to put into society, then that's kind of a good kind of rich, and rich is a very it gets thrown about a lot, but the word, I mean, I think wealth is a better word to describe it because you have this ability to allocate wealth, but rich is just a state of being.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So wealth is
but
more empowering, yeah, compared to
yeah,
just being rich.
yeah, yeah. And I think just because there is this investment phenomenon going on. I mean, investment's been going on for like a very long time. It's a very old business, but essentially, if you think about like building wealth through investing, just in my own perspective, like this is actually investing for me, right? I'm investing my time, investing my money on it, and I'm actually in asking investors to invest money into my venture, right?
Yep.
But the difference is now like it's a very special case because I have only one bet. Whereas investments in general usually have multiple bets. You can bet on different companies, right? Or uh, different portfolios. But unfortunately, being a business owner, you just focus on one bet, which is this business. The beautiful thing is that you have control over the outcome of the business. Whereas if you're an investor, you don't have as much of a control, right? I guess that's a trade-off. And I guess being at the helm of a business is much more exciting state to be in, then I guess being an investor. I might be wrong though. Maybe if I'm rich and then I'll become an investor, I might think differently.
No,
But for now, I think
I
it's
also
very
believe
exciting.
it's a matter of like your risk preference as well, right? And it will change over time. You know, as you are younger, like you want to have a more concentrated long-term bet that you are, you know, very very active in, which is your primary business right now. Like you would have like secondary bets as well, investments like that. For example, you're also a Recompound client. It might be something that is, but it's like very very tiny segment of your overall, you know, wealth in general. But then as you become more successful, for example, as you have make more money, the business is growing, blah blah, you might change your risk preference, and you might want to de-risk yourself from the business too much, and then start to diversify your investments a little bit to, you know, different business, and you'll be okay with not having control over the outcome of the companies that you invest in, as long as the person or like the management of that company is still earnest, still have the same values as you are, have good track record, have good competitive advantage, and it might give you better returns as well in the future, bearing in mind the risk preference that you are, you know, having might change over time.
I want to add one more thing about being incremental, about building wealth. Just like on reflection, you think about how increasingly inconsequential the first outcome of your first decision is when you make so many more decisions afterwards.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you think that building wealth, you have to make the right decision the first time. And then that determines the future. It doesn't work that way. And I think, I mean, it goes to risk taking too. Like if you take incremental risk, you realize that after a couple of years, you look back at your first risk you took, the outcome of that risk, even if it is a fail, it doesn't really matter that much, right? It kind of dilutes when you take more and more decisions moving forward. I think that applies to wealth too. Like investing my time and investing money is all about just doing it incrementally, changing directions, and making sure that you learn every step of the way, so that you know I mean, you're in a better position, number one, but secondly, you don't get stuck in that first decision that you're so scared of.
And by the way, this sounds very very easy to do, right? It's very sounds very nice in theory, but in practice it's freaking hard, right? Because you just have to like continue to grind every single day to make sure that you're learning something new, or like make sure that you're learning something about your business, about yourself, about the people that you work with, and then like make an informed decision as to like how do you want to develop this further, right? And do not just like assume that you make one risky bet today and then you stop learning for the rest of your life, and then things will change for you automatically, right? That's what you're trying to say.
Yes. And the opposite, like you making a good bet at the first step doesn't make you a successful person.
Yeah. Exactly. It needs to be like iterated all the time. Yeah.
You gotta keep your gotta be on your toes. Actually.
Yep. Okay, so I mean, I guess this is already like towards the end of like the podcast already. So I'm just gonna have like few closing questions. But I think one question that I'm really interested in asking you is, okay, so if you were to give an advice to someone who's actually stuck, right, on between like making a decision between like, should I quit my job, should I continue working my startup? So just now you already mentioned about a framework of, you know, default trust, but is there any kind of framework that you apply to someone who's in a crossroad, in between careers, or like figuring out whether they want to do this or not? What kind of advice would you give to that person?
Yeah, I mean, so I actually read an article from Recompound, and it actually talks a bit about my interactions with Toby and Shania. And the title of that article is Human Capital Accumulation. So it's kind of like it's very interesting because in one way, human capital accumulation is kind of an interesting way to look into your decisions as a person, to see if the future decisions you're going to make is going to increase your human capital, just not only about financial, but your skills, because you can actually still build up your skills even when you're older. But also that article speaks of my experience in transitioning from having a day job to actually being a founder. So I think as an advice, I mean, you can read that article as an advice, but the other thing is you need to understand where you are first, whether you are in a good position to even take any risk about your venture, right? Short term and long term. Okay. And if you can't even feed yourself for the next month, and when you quit the job, I don't think that's in a good position. I think you can't run a business properly when you're starving. So you gotta get that sorted first. But even after that is sorted, then you still have to think what sort of business you want to do and whether it's going to increase your skills or make you more curious and make your life more fulfilled. And that is kind of a more personal decision, right? Some people find baking, like baking cakes, to be very fulfilling and very skillful job. And to me, it's not really. And I probably wouldn't jump onto creating like a cake business, but another person would. But another person wouldn't start a technology startup, but I would, right? But at the higher level, it's all about whether you want to quit your job or not to start a business. And it really is contextual. You gotta look at what you're gonna do next, where you are now, whether you are able to pay for the risk, short term and long term, and whether it's gonna make you more fulfilled and more skillful.
Yep. No, I think honestly, for the last part as well, is very, very important because when people make decisions in the crossroads, they will they might have the temptation to FOMO or like copy other people in doing what others are doing. But I think the question whether it will make you more skillful and more fulfilled as a person who with certain kind of interests is something that they can stick to as a guiding principle when it comes to making decisions. And that's, I think, is very, very important for someone who's in a crossroads or like who's trying to figure out what they want to do. And obviously, like the risk part, like you need to be able to, make sure that you are well fed for the next couple of months or like years. And this is a full acknowledgement that being able to take risk is a privilege. It's not something that is, so it gives us the opportunity to also express gratitude that we are in a position to be able to take that risk in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, like just having that exercise might surprise you, and how much stuff you need to know about yourself and the thing that you're gonna do, right? It kind of as a soul searching exercise, and like you can keep doing that even after you've started the business, because then you will see that, right? Maybe I could have done better in this thing. Maybe the business that I'm doing is not in a good place, or I'm not in the right business. Yeah.
Makes sense. Hey, and don't forget to read the Recompound article as well. I totally didn't pay you to say that. It's called the Human Accumulation. What was that? I forgot. What's the title? Human Capital Accumulation thing. Yeah, that's a good article. It's not written by me. So it's a good article. Okay. Cool. Any closing remarks that you want to say, or like any questions that you might have for me that you haven't really talked about throughout this podcast as well that I can help you with?
I mean, I actually want to ask you about risk,
Mm-hmm.
because how do you approach that? Do you have a framework, and how did that change across time?
Yeah, so for risk, I usually believe I used to believe that risk is like volatility, because you in finance you would study that price volatility is risk. If you buy a stock, for example, then you would what is it called? Might need to exit at a time, but then when you want to exit, the price volatility might make it, not ideal for you to exit. But then as I go through my own investment journey, I realized that, life is very, very volatile, right? But we don't really consider life to be super risky. I mean, it is risky, but then we don't think about life being volatile as something that is very, very scary inherently to us, right? So it might be something different than about risk when we think about risk in that way. So it might not be accurate for us to say that, oh yeah, the volatility of life is risky, or like the volatility of the stock market is risky. So I basically read more, and then I realized that, yeah, risk is, for me, is about how much do you lose if your assumption is wrong. So for example, if you invest in a stock A, for example, and then you know that the company is growing, the management is good, blah, blah, but then you buy it at like a super expensive price, you don't know anything about the fundamentals of the company, and then you all in your wealth in that particular stock, right? So you investing in a particular company carries, you investing in a certain company means that you are betting that the future of that company will be good, right? Otherwise you won't invest. And when you are betting that the future of the company will be good, means that you are making an assumption that can be wrong. So risk is like how much do you stand to lose if that assumption turns out to be wrong. That's like how I view risk right now. So when I look at my investments, for example, I always look at how much would I lose if my assumptions are wrong. So I have a set of assumptions that needs to be continuously refined, and you refine. It's always a work in progress. Investors are never perfect, but then as you become, more and more into this field, you realize that, yeah, that's like how you want to manage risk is very, very important. Like how you want to minimize the losses when your assumptions turn out to be wrong is very, very important. Right now, obviously, you can take more risks because you're still young. You're still young, right? But then into the future, that risk preference might change over time as you experience significant life events like getting married, having a children, or like having a new financial obligation, and so on and so forth. So yeah, those are like the things that that is like the meta model that I use to understand more about risk. Yeah.
I think that's a very useful framework. What you stand to lose when the assumption is wrong. I mean, that's a very kind of concrete way to think about risk, because people don't really think about risk that way a lot of the time. And I think that's something that I'm going to take away from this. Gotta do that more often, because I think that will give decisions much better weight. That okay, the assumption is wrong in this following manner. Here's how I can kind of mitigate the events that happen afterwards.
Yeah, and obviously you need to know the assumptions that you're making as well. So I think you already know what are the assumptions that you make when you make a bet, right? So what happens if those assumptions are wrong? So if something catastrophic, like, so for example, if this assumption is wrong, then the whole country will go bankrupt. Then you know that it's not super risky, because chances are the whole country will not go bankrupt. For example, right? Or it can. I mean, there are so many developing countries that end up going bankrupt or like having hyperinflation and so on and so forth. But it's not something that you can. Which is why you still need to diversify anyway, right? So you might try not to lose everything over there. Yeah. Cool. I think that's pretty much it for today, Owen. And thank you so much for like the super insightful conversation. And I really hope that our audience would enjoy this podcast.
And thank you so much for inviting me. And thank you for the time. Really appreciate all the insights you've given us. And all the best. Really all the best for your business.
Bro, all the best for you too, bro. It's all the best for you.
And thank you so much.